Focus. Ideate, innovate, enable.
Hello and welcome to our popular series, Making It Big. We are now into season 6. This series captures the essence of an entrepreneur's spirit, drive and passion. Essentially, it chronicles how an entrepreneur in India has to fight all odds to make it big in his world of business. In the last 5 years, this series has featured over 50 companies with the underlying objective of providing budding entrepreneurs a successful business model which they can emulate. And this seems to have worked like a magic. Many of the budding entrepreneurs and B school students have not only found the stories inspirational and aspirational, but are asking for more. So here we are, ready to roll out more such success stories in season 6. Here I must candidly admit that this journey of bringing inspirational stories has been collaborative. Our partner in this journey for the last 6 years has been Sandeep Uppal, MD and Head of Commercial Banking, HSBC. Sandeep, if I may say, has an eye for picking marathon winners. What I mean is that all the 54 companies featured in this series during the last 6 years have not only survived, but have thrived. Each of this company is growing from strength to strength. So clearly, Sandeep has mastered the art and science of picking winners into a fine craft. On that note, let me welcome Sandeep to the show. Sandeep, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Sandeep, we met last year just after Modi government was sworn in, and it's almost a year now. So if you were to collectively look at the portfolio of our clients and plot the stories, what they're telling you, what are 3 or 4 things that is coming out about this new government?
Clearly, Ravi, when we met last time and we were at the show a year back, clearly a lot of optimism was there in the market. Some may say maybe a bit unreal at times.
Yeah.
When I spoke to our overseas customers, they were very enthused and very focused on India. Since then, the assessment is a little more realistic now, because when I speak to the customers and various corporates, they do realize that there's no silver bullet which was required.
Point, yeah.
An economy like India, a complex country like India required thousands of bullets and new ones every day, given the issues and the problems which the country faces.
Yeah, correct.
Now that takes time. So when I speak to the corporates now, they would want obviously those bullets to be fired faster,
Yeah,
and they want
perfect.
many more of those bullets. On the other hand, they do appreciate the fact that the environment is a lot more stable. And what I mean by stable is that they see the currency to be a lot more stable.
Yeah.
They see the interest rates to be stable. They may not be going down as fast as they hope they would, but at least they're going in one direction.
True.
Plus, one thing they do really appreciate is that largely the input costs have come down. The missing piece for them really is that the top lines are not growing as fast as they would like them to.
Okay.
In my mind, that's also linked to the fact that India is largely a domestic economy and a large domestic economy.
True, yeah.
And like any large domestic economy, it's constructed like what I describe as a traditional economy. So you've got infrastructure at the bottom, which then feeds into capital goods, which feeds into ultimate consumption, what we call FMCG.
Yeah, right.
Now, where the economy at the moment is, with a slowdown, you want the infrastructure to fire, which will push up the capex, which will push up the FMCG or the ultimate consumption. Now, that transmission takes some time.
Yeah.
And that's why our expectation is that the real growth, or what people expect, one can't really see that happening before the end of the year or first quarter of the next calendar year.
HSBC is located at all the important capital of the world. So what is your global counterpart telling you? A Sandeep sitting in Hong Kong, a Sandeep sitting in New York, what is he telling you? Is he saying that India's story is still good enough? Are they still gung-ho about this country?
That part hasn't changed. They were always very optimistic about India, given the fact where our demographics are, given the fact that there's a strong spirit of entrepreneurship in the country. Clearly, they have seen cycles. They were expecting this cycle to be that much stronger.
Okay.
Even from their perspective, their assessment is a little more realistic. So the question we are posed often is, what are the tangible actions? Because I get a sense that they would like to see that much more tangible action. But the good part is, whenever we are able to demonstrate tangible action, we get rewarded. And the way the growth or the inward investment can really grow if we make that a vicious circle, that we show tangible action, we get rewarded, we show more tangible action, and that pie just gets bigger and bigger. Now, why that is important is, clearly, we are part of a global economy. We are not an island on its own. Investors and our customers, when we speak to, they have options. While India is attractive and India is making itself more attractive, you have China, you got Vietnam, Singapore, Malaysia, and the list can go on. So it's very important that we position ourselves firmly and strongly as the #1 destination.
Well, you talked about tangible action. Now, one metrics which can actually talk about the tangible action is the ease of doing business. According to World Bank ranking, India stands at 144. We all know that. But the new government headed by Modi wants to take the rank to 50. So what a sense you are getting talking to the corporate about the reality at the ground level?
Say, first of all, ease of doing business, I think a lot of the focus has been on the ranking, rightfully so, and that's a good place to start.
Yeah.
I used to work earlier in Mauritius, and my experience is that when you try and move that ranking, it gets to be fairly complex, because when you go into the criteria of ease of doing business, it's very broad and very detailed. So for any government to really move up the ranking, there are plethora of issues to be addressed. By focusing on ease of doing business as a good target, that's a great place to start. There's been action on certain fronts. Clearly, there's that much more to do. This gets to be a little more complex in a country like India, because you've got a central government and then you've got number of states. Many of the issues are not really with the central government, they're with the states. So we also like the part that the government is also focusing on states competing with each other. So while India competes with other countries, allowing states to compete with each other would make us as a country that much more efficient.
Okay, the good news is the financial year has begun on a very positive note. The IIP numbers has kicked in at 4.1% compared to 2.5% in March. But there's a worrying factor also, which some people are telling me, that there is an underutilization of capacity in the industry today. Some sectors are operating at 60%, 70%, and so on and so forth. So do you think this growth rate is going to be sustainable?
If you look back in the last few quarters, and our observation has been that it's been somewhat erratic, the way it's moved around. The last set of numbers for IIP were good, and from a corporate sector, it'll be useful to see how sustainable it is, and that sustainability would come out over a 3 to 4 quarter period. And if it is, then to your point, the capacity which is there in the economy at the moment, it'll start eating up into that capacity. In addition to that, if entrepreneurs see sustainable growth, which they can project not just 1 year, 2, 3 years forward, they are then likely to invest that much more into the economy and take a chance and take that risk. So the capex cycle, which has been kind of muted till now, would come back not just because of the growth eating up capacity, but the confidence entrepreneurs get in that growth, which will also lead to additional capacity.
Sandeep, the credit offtake has been very low. I think somebody tells me it's something like 18-year low. What is the reason for this?
So when I looked at the corporate world, we can see there are a number of companies which have capacity.
No.
So when you have capacity, there's no reason to invest, and that's why your credit offtake would be low. Secondly, if you're not putting your money, what you're generating, into capex, you're anyway going to pay off the banks. Okay. So profitable companies are turning as much zero debt or closer to zero debt as possible. The second part is, when you look at the horizon of the corporate sector, there are a number of companies and groups which have high level of debt.
Okay.
While they may have an idea, they may have a reason to borrow, but they do not have the ability because of the debt they're sitting on. So that would be the second reason. The third one clearly is what's been debated often is the interest rates. To me, that's a question of pure economics, demand and supply. The cheaper the good, the more it sells. So clearly, if interest rates were lower, demand would pick up. The mute question is, how strong is the correlation given where the economy is currently?
So as a banker, which sectors are you betting on? Because I was told a lot of brownfield and greenfield projects coming in the area of energy space, pipeline, smart cities.
I guess the view on sectors, what I've observed in the banking sector has kind of transformed over the last couple of years. With the slowdown over the last couple of years, I was seeing the sectors like a bookcase, with one end being the consumer and second end being, you could say, the infrastructures aspect. And people, whether they were banks or investors, were betting more on those sectors which are closer to the consumer. So whether if it was FMCG, pharma, auto, and the likes of that. Now clearly, as the economy starts galloping, which is expected over the next couple of years, then we could go back to a traditional model, and I go back to the point I made earlier of infra, capex, consumption. Then all three broad sectors would look attractive, and people would then start looking and being discerning about the companies within those specific sectors. But we also have another view of sectors, which is a different way of looking at it, that let's look at sectors which or where India can be globally competitive, because then you can transcend the economy to an extent. Now clearly the most obvious sector which jumps out is IT, because everyone knows that we have some great companies in IT, and we got the capability to be world beaters. The second sector which I pick would be Indian pharmaceutical, which without putting how many years would eventually get to where Indian IT is. Following footstep of Indian pharma, I believe, is the Indian auto sector. We are already world leaders in two-wheelers. We are developing world-class capability in small cars, which will only get enhanced as our expertise and skill set builds up, which can then move into off-highway vehicles, it can move into commercial vehicles. A sector beyond that, which is still in its infancy, but another one we are keeping a close watch on, is specialty chemicals. Because that's again an area where there's a lot of value add, there are a lot of engineering skills required, and India is great at that. Now if you step back and look at these sectors generally,
IT, pharma, auto, and
you get a sense that what India is intuitively trying to do is to become Germany of the emerging markets.
Okay, now let me turn the focus on Indian entrepreneurs. Now you have worked in different parts of the world. So is the DNA of entrepreneurs all over the world same? Or Indian entrepreneurs are different breed when it comes to taking risk or in terms of vision?
I worked in at least 5 countries and have interacted with entrepreneurs. I would say at the core, the DNA of the entrepreneurs is very, very similar. They are passionate about what they do. They got a huge drive. They have risk-taking ability. So that I would say is a common set of skill sets which an entrepreneur has. When I look at the Indian landscape, there are 2 elements which then come out quite strongly. One is the fact that traditionally we've had family-run or family-dominated businesses. And it's quite interesting how generations of a family can entwine themselves into the management of a company. And we do still come across a number of companies where very successfully we have 3 generations working under one roof. The second aspect which also jumps out is the sheer complexity which an Indian entrepreneur has to deal with. While we hear a lot about infrastructure, bureaucracy, what complicates matter further is the fact that India is a combination of states with very different consumption habits, very different regulations, different language, and an entrepreneur who has to now make his or her mark across the country needs to grapple with that level of complexity. And I do really believe that the Indian entrepreneur level of complexity or number of variable sets are much higher than any part of the world, at least most parts of the world. And that may be one reason why Indian entrepreneurs are so successful going overseas, because they find a lot of those environments much easier to navigate as compared to the environment they work in India.
Other environments are not so complex as is in India.
That's right.
Okay, today what I find is more and more people want to be entrepreneurs. See, most of them have good ideas, good education qualifications, but no money. So how do you bet on this new class of entrepreneurs? As an investor, what are 3 or 4 things you all look at when you invest in this new breed of entrepreneurs?
I said my observation is that if you look at the breed of entrepreneurs, what you look at is still not very different from what you've traditionally done. So what have you traditionally done? Whether it's a debt provider or an equity provider, you looked at the management or the person behind the company, and you have to have confidence in their abilities, their passion, their drive, the vision of what they're creating. Second is, you look at the business model, Is that a viable business model? Is that a sustainable business model? Is that a relevant business model? Then you look at the financial metrics which support that business model. Is it compatible?
Okay.
And then you bring the whole thing together and saying, is this sustainable? If I'm going to take an exposure of the company, whether it's for 3 months, 3 years or 30 years, how confident or comfortable I am with the viability of the company. So those basic metrics haven't changed. What has changed is the sheer sectors which are coming out now, which never existed in the past.
Sandeep, we are seeing a big valuation in e-commerce space, housing space, healthcare space. One gets a feeling that doing business in India is easy where money is concerned. You have PE player, angel investor, hedge fund falling over each other to bankroll you. Does this trend worry you?
What you described is not India specific in a way, because if you look across the globe, whether it's the developed world or China, Singapore, you will see all across that a number of new age companies are getting terrific valuations because of the prospects the investors can see in these companies. Now, beauty lies in the eyes of the beholder.
Yeah.
So I don't think anyone else is in a position to really agree or not to agree. Time will tell, because our experience across even the developed world is that although there will be a number of companies with similar models, there will be space only for a couple of companies to make it within that sector, and those will be the companies which will eventually be successful. So at times I've described it to people as, we all remember the Bollywood actor, but we never remember those 100 or 1,000 behind who never made it.
Okay, now let me turn to our most popular series, Making It Big. Over the last 5 seasons, we have featured over 50 companies, big and small companies, family-run, first-generation entrepreneurs, employee-turned-employer, professionally run companies, 3-generation-old, plus we also had a BFR company. So is there a common thread to all these companies or entrepreneurs?
If I can pick up one common thread is, they all fantastic examples of what human ambition can achieve. You recollect, Ravi, interacting with all these entrepreneurs. One thing for sure, there's never a dull moment. The passion they bring, the ambition they bring, that's what makes these companies successful. So that one common thread is just the human ambition they brought to the table.
So incidentally, all the companies we have featured in this show are growing from strength to strength. None of them are faded away. But what I want to ask you is, why do successful brands or companies fail?
So even if you go to the listed companies, I am told that you'd be surprised when you pick up FTSE 100 or any of the major indexes, that there are not that many companies in the index who have been around for more than 100 years. So that really proves that to have a sustainable business model and to be successful over a long period needs a level of consistency which has not been achieved by many of the great companies in the past.
You're right.
In my mind, it's a bit like a dinosaur. If you do not have the ability to evolve, you will die away like a dinosaur. So a successful company is the one which is able to evolve with the environment, is agile enough to evolve with an environment. That is more important today than it was ever in the past, given that economies are changing so rapidly that one single trait which defines a successful company would be evolution.
Sandeep, is there a ready-made winning formula or recipe for success?
I won't say there's any formula, because seeing the entrepreneurs work, it's horses for courses. But what really stands out for me is the passion they have for the business, and that comes out strongly every time you interact with them. The second for me is the drive they bring, because success is never overnight. It is the drive which they've done for days, years, decades together. The third one, which is a standout for me, is that you have to be customer centric. With everything else with you, you have to ensure you yourself and the business have to be centered and focused completely on the customer.
Very well put, Sandeep. Thanks a lot for being on the show. It's a pleasure having you here.
Focus. Ideate, innovate, enable.